It's happening everywhere, not just in the United States, but all over the planet, wherever human habitation is rapidly growing. We know it as urban sprawl. The cutting down of trees and vegetation to make way for housing developments and shopping centres for human use. But what happens to the wildlife? The deer, the lizards, the alligators, and even the delicate butterflies that once lived in the virgin wilderness and wetlands destroyed by man's bulldozers. Considering the need to expand our own habitat, can we find ways to maintain nature's equilibrium? Can we find ways for human beings and wildlife to coexist? The city of Cape Coral on the Gulf Coast of Florida is a case in point. In recent years, this city has grown rapidly. The population currently numbers approximately 100,000 and is projected to increase to approximately 135,000 by the year 2008. The area was originally coastal mangrove swamp surrounded by pine forest, but the swamp and forest have largely been cleared and drained. What has happened in Cape Coral represents a success story of how human beings are making an effort to help one species survive these environmental changes. This story involves a little-known creature, the burrowing owl. It's a story of human concern, human caring, and most importantly, human action. Quite well known throughout Florida, and particularly in Cape Coral, the tiny burrowing owl is just slightly larger than a soft drink can. Unlike other members of its species, this owl does not migrate, but instead stays resident in one location all year round. Although not endangered, the burrowing owl is listed by the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission as a species of special concern. Once widespread throughout the state, the owls are now most heavily concentrated in the city of Cape Coral. Cindy Bear, a volunteer working with the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission, carried out a 5-year survey and monitoring project of the Florida burrowing owls of Cape Coral.
Because of the loss of the burrowing owl populations in other parts of the state, the birds have been listed as a species of special concern by the state of Florida. What it means when an animal is a species of special concern is that we're at a threshold point. We can make some decisions that will either ensure the survival of that species, or we won't make those decisions, and that species will be lost to us. Florida's growing at a tremendous rate. We get 950 or so people a day that move permanently to our state. Most of them settle near the coast, and Cape Coral is one of those areas that's growing tremendously. As the area grows, the burrowing owls are losing ground. They're losing their habitat. And we have a great concern that within the next 10 to 15 years, this population is going to be declining, and within 20 to 25 years, we could lose them in the city of Cape Coral. And because the city of Cape Coral is the place with the most Florida burrowing owls anywhere, if we lose them here, we lose them, period.
First attracted here by the artificial prairies that formed following the clearing of the mangrove swamps. Nesting in burrows which the male excavates, this breed is distinctly different from their western counterparts, who simply take over the burrow of another animal. The burrows are typically 3 to 4 feet deep and may be up to 11 feet long and meander considerably. perhaps uniquely, the Florida burrowing owl is remarkably tolerant of people and their effects upon the owl's territories.
When we studied the birds, we did a comparison of development areas within the city of Cape Coral, and there were some parts of the city that were very heavily developed. They were 75% or greater in development, houses, buildings, businesses. There were other parts of the city that had very little development, 25% or less. And then there were some parts of our city that had a moderate amount of development. In those areas of moderate development are where the birds did the best. They fledged the most young, they have a greater chance of having nesting success, and they survive very well. That's due in part to the fact that they eat insects, and people attract insects. With our streetlights and our landscaping and our yards and our trash, we attract cockroaches and crickets and spiders and moths and beetles, and all these things the birds will eat. However, where there's a large amount of development, there's simply nowhere for the birds to have a burrow. If it's covered with asphalt, if it's covered with a driveway, if it's covered with a house, they're not going to be able to themselves have a place to rear their young. So in those areas of moderate development is where we're looking for preservation for this bird.
Generally speaking, both the male and the female owls are the same size and are hard to tell apart, except during the breeding season. At this time, the male appears much lighter due to the bleaching by the intense rays of the tropical sunshine. The darker female spends much time in the burrow incubating the eggs, which may number between 4 and 6, and which take about 30 days to hatch. Interestingly, to indicate that eggs are present, the front of the burrow is often decorated with trash items such as cigarette butts, bits of paper, wood shavings, and even dog and cat feces. The newly born owlets first venture out of the burrow when they reach about 10 to 14 days old. They are inquisitive creatures, scrutinizing everything around them with their huge eyes. In fact, the eyes of all owls are so large that they can hardly move in their sockets as ours can. They compensate for this by being able to move their heads around through a 270-degree angle. It is critical that between February and July, which is the breeding season, that these birds are not disturbed by human activities such as building construction. Fortunately, in this regard, they enjoy the full protection of the law through a powerful friend, Cape Coral's Chief of Police, Arnold Gibbs.
There needs to be every attempt made to coexist with animals without causing them harm. They're living things, and they have a right to live, and they were here first. So we pretty much have to build around them, and we have codes here that protect them in the city of Cape Coral, which is good. Many of our citizens, our residents, will watch to see if anybody does anything contrary to what the law requires them to do with regard to these animals and birds, and they report them, and when they do, the city of Cape Coral takes action. So we don't take it lightly here.
It is during the days just following birth that the young are especially vulnerable, falling prey to domestic cats and dogs, as well as to hawks and raccoons, despite their parents' devoted attention. Regardless of their small size, and at the risk of their own lives, both parents will defend the youngsters fiercely.
They're extremely attentive and protective parents. In fact, when I would go out to ban young birds, I would have to wear a hat to keep the birds from going after me with their feet and going after my skull. And that's quite a testament to these birds. They're a small bird. I'm not a large human being, but I'm certainly a lot bigger than they are. And yet, in order to protect their young, they would in fact try to come after me, chase me away, and to scare me. So they're quite attentive and very protective parents.
Free from human disturbance, the young owls grow rapidly, sustained on a varied diet of insects, invertebrates, and other small animals, including mice, frogs, snakes, and small birds. Like most birds of prey, these owls will swallow small creatures whole. The bolder, more aggressive chicks will generally consume more of the food and hence appear larger than their more timid siblings. These will be the ones most likely to survive and breed. Out of a clutch of 4 to 6 hatchlings, only 2 or 3 will fledge on average, but often all will make it depending on building development intensity. The male is usually the provider. He hunts and catches the food, while the female guards the chicks. On his return, the female takes the food from him and feeds the hungry babies. Occasionally, the male will feed the young directly. The chicks are fully fledged at the age of 6 weeks and will soon start to fly. They'll stay around the burrow for several more weeks, and their parents will continue to feed them. But this is now the critical time, for they must perfect their hunting skills and so learn to fend for themselves. One day soon, however, the parents will no longer provide, and they'll be on their own. It is during this time that they are at most risk from perhaps their most deadly enemy, traffic. This is the leading cause not only of owl fatalities, but in fact all wildlife fatalities in Cape Coral. Dr. P.J. Deitchell, associate on the staff of Crow, discusses the many life-threatening hazards faced by wild animals.
CROW stands for Care and Rehabilitation of Wildlife, and that's exactly what we do here. We take care of wild animals, we try to get them all better, put them back out in the wild where they belong. So we handle native Florida wildlife and migratory birds. We spend a good part of our time on the phone responding to calls from people, distraught people that have found injured animals. Of course, they always think you have an ambulance service and you're going to run right out and pick the animal up. So we spend a lot of time trying to talk them into capturing the animal themselves and bringing the animal over to us. We do have volunteers who will go around to different of the vet clinics where animals have been dropped off. But ideally, the animal is going to get the best care if we can talk that finder into bringing the animal directly to us. We receive approximately 50 burrowing owls a year, and most of their injuries are due to being hit by cars. 80% of all the orphans we get in are truly abducted. People see these small little birds, they look helpless, and they want to pick them up. But truly, mom and dad are nearby. They're teaching those animals where to hide, what to eat, who to be afraid of. Although they're not right next to them, that doesn't mean those little babies have been abandoned. And people need to realize to leave those animals alone, that that's part of their education, is to be out there making some mistakes.
At the first sign of danger, the vulnerable chicks will bolt down the burrow. They will make a hissing sound, very similar to the characteristic sound of a rattlesnake, which is interesting, as these snakes sometimes use old burrows to shelter in. So, this roost may often deter burrowing predators such as raccoons from trying to dig them out. The burrow also provides a cool sanctuary from the torrid midday sun. Afternoon temperatures here frequently reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit. With the aid of an image intensifier, we can see that, as with other owls, these birds are also active at night. The parents take advantage of the presence of nocturnal insects and small mammals to keep the chicks supplied with food. Rick Sosnowski is a city planner with the city of Cape Coral. A major part of his job is to monitor building development in the area to protect the burrowing owls.
We're in the middle of nesting season right now. We do have a burrow behind us that looks like it has chicks in it. And this is the most critical period when it comes to protecting the owl burrows. And there's a permit system set up, so when someone wants to develop a property and there's an owl burrow in the way, what they would have to do is get a state and federal permit to destroy that nest. And the whole idea behind the permitting system is that no owl nest will be destroyed while it's active, meaning that there's eggs or flightless young inside the burrow.
Although the nest cannot be destroyed during the breeding season, building work may proceed around it, and the owls are protected by roping off a 10-foot radial protection zone centered on the burrow's entrance. Builders who destroy active burrows can expect to pay very heavy fines, ranging up to $5,000.
We've been able to take advantage of some computer technology to help the owls out too. Whenever I get a report that there's an owl on a particular site, I log it into a computer database, and that comes up as a flag whenever that lot receives an application for a building permit, so that we don't inadvertently have owl conflicts with developers who either didn't know or claim they didn't know.
By carefully trapping and banding as many of the owls as possible, Cindy is able to gather vital information that is so critical to the future of these precious little owls. Although the birds do not feel at ease during this process, it causes no injury to the animal and is dealt with as quickly as possible.
20406234. One thing we do when we've got the bird while we're banding him is check for some things. I can tell now she's definitely a female. I assumed that from her color, but as I blow away her feathers, you can see an area here where the feathers have been worn through incubating and brooding the young. The other thing I'm going to check for is just make sure she didn't have a lot of parasites in her feathers or her wings. I'm going to look for any wing bars. The only thing I can tell about her age right now is that she's an after hatching year. Sometimes you can find little fault bars on their wings where they've molted and had a bad feather come in, and it leaves a telltale line, and from that you can sometimes tell their age. But I'm going to try to gently bring her out here and check on her a little bit. She's got the yellow eyes. Okay, she's doing really well. A lot of people are concerned about banding birds. It definitely causes her some fear, I'm sure, during the time that we have her. However, the science and the information that we get is critical. When we talk to people about purchasing habitat here in Cape Coral, one of the first things they wanted to know was, what if you buy a burrow and then the birds don't show up again? And of course, through long-term monitoring, we now know that once a territory is established, birds will use it. And we also know by banding the birds that they do mate for life. We know a lot of things about how far their young move, and now we've got a good idea of a conservation plan so that we can come up with a strategy to preserve these birds in the future. And that's really what banding the birds is all about. Yeah, one thing that's intriguing about Cape Coral as you look around is that this is all created by people. Certainly people create a lot of areas where they live, but this was an extreme situation. Cape Coral is over 100 square miles, and natively it was pine flatwoods, cypress swamps, oak hammocks, freshwater streams. What people did was come in and take that entire 100 square miles, literally cut down everything that was native, dug miles and miles, hundreds and hundreds of miles of canals, and used that dirt to create a little higher elevation. And the big selling point here was to be all that great waterfront property. So literally everything that you see when you scan around here was artificially created. All the trees are new and were planted, the grass has come back, the soil is totally altered. And what's intriguing is that the Florida Burrowing Owl had existed in this area for a long period of time, but their stronghold in Florida had been up in the native shortgrass prairies of our state. Those areas were altered due to agriculture, and as those areas were altered, these areas along the coast, like Cape Coral, were being altered and turned into a modified human-created shortgrass prairie. So the birds moved, their distributions changed, and now this has become their stronghold. And what indicates to me is how well these birds really can adapt to people, and now it's people that really need to adapt to the birds.
The efforts of people like Cindy and Rick have helped make the residents of the city of Cape Coral well aware of the importance of maintaining these delightful creatures right on their doorsteps. To many local residents like Mickey Porto, who have active burrows on their property, these birds have become a big part of their families' lives.
The owls pair for life. And it's really been a lot of fun to watch them when the little ones are born, to watch them grow up and then they leave. And one time we had a lot of times we have a lot of heavy rain here in Florida, and the rain filled up their burrow, and one of the little babies, and the baby was only, 3 or 4 inches tall, and it ended up in the canal. And my wife had to go in the neighbor's boat, and we had to untie it and send her out there, and she had to rescue the little baby. And we didn't know what to do with it, so she called the police department, and the police department told her, well, just hold on to it, and we'll send somebody right over. And we had it wrapped in a towel, and the police came over, and they took it and gave it to the wildlife people. And my wife checked a couple of days later, and they said that the baby was doing real well, and they were getting ready to let it go again. And it's really been interesting to watch them every single year. You see a lot of roadkill around here in Cape Coral, Florida, and there's a lot of people that actually go out of their way to miss the animals crossing the street, but then there's a lot of people that go out of their way to run the animals over, and it's wrong. The animals were here before us. We need to take more care, I think, the public does, to make sure that the animal population keeps going.
Sometimes, the owls decide to take up residence in a busy commercial area.
About a year ago, we had a guest here, and as one of the burrowing owls, decided to start hanging out in front of the restaurant in the rafters. And he was here for a couple weeks, and everybody was amazed that he was here, and then he never left. It got to the point where the customers started looking for him, and he just really became part of the place. My oldest daughter, named him Kooky, and I guess she named him that because the burrowing owl is not supposed to be up in the rafters. They're supposed to be down under. And then about 6 months later, he got a girlfriend over here, and she lived here for about 4 months, and she's been gone now for a couple months, and I'm assuming she's underneath in her burrow across the street where Kooky's guarding her right now. And they're just wonderful, wonderful animals. Like I said, the customers got so used to them being here, even still, they come, they look for them. They know if it's raining really hard, chances are they're not going to be here. They know when the sun goes down, chances are they won't be here, but from early morning until dusk, they're definitely here hanging out at the restaurant.
It's up to us really to learn to live with the birds. The birds can live with us without any problems. Without us learning to live with the owls, however, there won't be Florida burrowing owls here.
I admire the birds, actually. The fact that they stay together like for life. Most human beings haven't gotten that right yet, and these birds are teaching us something here.
As we see more and more people coming into the land that actually belongs to these animals, encroaching on their environment, we see more and more hit by car animals. And I try to tell people that this is their land. We are driving our cars through their homes. It's our responsibility to stop and look both ways for those animals. Mama Raccoon doesn't teach her babies to stop at the side of the road and look both ways.
People are concerned about how the wildlife is getting pushed out because of development, because of roads. I think that the people, the city, and the government, they need to be able to live with the animals, not push them all out. Because pretty soon, I believe that maybe there won't be any wildlife left, and my children's children won't have any to see at all.
To my mind, if we can't preserve a bird like the Florida Burrowing Owl that is so amenable to humans, that does so get along with people, then really we're not going to have a lot of chances for preserving other wildlife. And when we lose wildlife, we lose a big part of ourselves and a huge part of our planet.